Panama Canal is also suffering from major disruption as many fewer ships are now getting through. The culprit this time, though, is climate change.
Imagine if the coffee you had yesterday cost an arm and a leg tomorrow. That toothbrush you're using will be unaffordable a week later? Impossible. If the Panama Canal dies, it won't be. The Panama Canal is one of, if not the most important shipping routes that connects the world's supply chain. It connects the Atlantic Ocean with the Pacific and makes international trade as we know it today a possibility. Unfortunately, that might not be true for long. The Panama Canal might be dying. Why is it dying? What does that mean for the world? What is being done about it? Well, let's find out. Before we talk about why the Panama Canal dying might be such a big deal, it's important to understand why the canal itself is so notable. Ever since its completion in 1914, the Panama Canal has played a pivotal role in maritime transportation and global trade. Situated on the Isthmus of Panama, the canal connects the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans, offering a shortcut that would otherwise take ships around the tip of South America. It reduces the travel time between the oceans by about 5 months and travel distance by 8,000 miles. The Panama Canal sees over 12,000 transits annually, with a significant portion of the world's shipping passing through its waters. Because of the shortened travel time and distance, the Panama Canal saves merchant ships the cost of fuel by a huge margin. On the other hand, since the Panamanian government manages the Panama Canal, it routinely brings in billions of dollars in taxes and tariffs. Nearly $3 billion were generated by the Panama Canal during the fiscal year 2021. The tolls count for roughly 80% of the Panama Canal's revenue and 10% of the country's total revenue. Smaller vessels have to pay around $10,000 in taxes, but the Neo-Panamax container ships reportedly pay $300,000. Prices often soar during peak periods, and the canal has been known to become crowded. Premium access is then auctioned off to ships that can afford to pay. Safe to say, it is Panama's most important financial resource. Likewise, with the Red Sea being attacked by Houthis in response to Israel's genocide attempts, the Panama Canal has taken greater importance in global trade. That is not all. The Panama Canal is an engineering marvel. It is designed to include a system of locks, channels, and artificial lakes that overcome the varying elevations of the terrain. These locks were 320 meters long and 33 meters wide, setting the standard for maritime trade ships. The Gatun Locks, one of the canal's locks on the Gatun River, is among the world's largest and most complex lock systems. It has 3 chambers that are filled with water to elevate the ships to the level of the Gatun Lake and lower it to allow ships to climb through the canal. All that water has to go somewhere, right? Well, it flows into the ocean. That would be important, so keep it in mind. It's no secret that the Panama Canal was a miracle. So how did it all come together? The history of the Panama Canal spans several centuries. Before there was a canal, ships would pass around the Cape Horn to travel between the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans. This was a long and expensive journey, and of course dangerous too. When there's a problem, there are also people looking for solutions. The Isthmus of Panama is a prime location for a canal since it is a narrow stretch of land. In 1855, work began to build a canal connecting the 2 oceans and cut down on global trade time and costs. Unfortunately, due to diseases and financial difficulties, the operation was proceeding at a slow pace. The man in charge of the project was the great Frenchman, Ferdinand de Lesseps, the same person who had successfully built the Suez Canal in Egypt. He took over the project in the late 19th century and tried replicating his past success, but even he faced an uphill battle. Mortality rates among the workers grew increasingly high due to tropical diseases and difficulties of engineering. It is estimated that over 30,000 workers lost their lives, making it the construction project with the highest documented fatality rate in the world. Overall, it killed 40% of its workforce. However, as time passed, things began to improve. In 1904, the United States, under the leadership of President Theodore Roosevelt, took over the project after the collapse of the French effort. Chief Engineer John F. Stevens and later Lieutenant Colonel George W. Goethals played pivotal roles in overcoming the engineering challenges. Notable figures in this period included Dr. William C. Gorgas, who led the successful campaign to eradicate mosquito-borne diseases, and Chief Sanitation Officer Colonel William C. Gorgas, whose efforts drastically improved the living conditions of workers. Similarly, the teams used a complex system of steam engines and railway engineering to move rocks and stone. The Panama Canal was officially opened on April 15, 1914, just as the world was plunged into the Great War. The US had total control of the canal, but the process to hand the canal back to Panama was put in motion in the 1970s. In 1999, Panama became the owner of the canal. It boosted its economy as a result of the taxes generated from it. The Panama Canal was a monumental success. The world is still reaping its rewards. However, it seems hard times are on the horizon. The Panama Canal is dying. Remember when we talked about the locking mechanism of the canal? The locks manage water from two artificial lakes called Lake Gatun and Lake Aluela. Inland rivers irrigate these lakes. The locks raise and reduce the sea level to allow ships to pass. A system of locomotives move the ships from one lock to another. By using these locks, around 200 to 250 million liters of fresh water from the canal are lost to the ocean each time a ship passes through. While the canal has been operating just fine over the century, climate change and drought have recently made this unsustainable. Weather patterns have changed, and the rainfall cannot replenish the lakes fast enough as they lose millions of liters of water with each ship. Ever since 2019, there has been a dry season where water precipitation indicators are often stuck at zero in the region. The water levels in the rivers and lakes are so low that the Panamanian government is now taking precautionary measures. The authorities have slashed ship crossings by 36%, and the weight capacity of ships is reduced to prevent them from hitting the bed at the bottom and traveling through the notably drier lakes. Ships passing through have to reduce the number of containers before passing through. This has increased the long wait times, rising from 4 to 20 days, almost destabilizing the global supply chain. The restriction on the vessels will likely result in a $200 million drop in earnings in 2024. This is a major blow to the economy of Panama. This traffic jam has made it difficult to move goods across oceans, forcing companies to look for alternative ways. With the crisis in the Red Sea currently affecting trade in the Middle East, alternatives are in short supply. That's not all. While a marvel of engineering in its time, the canal is starting to show its age. Ships are now built to be even bigger and wider. Unfortunately, the width of the canal has more or less remained the same. It gives the illusion that the canal has narrowed, disallowing many of the latest container ships to pass through with ease. Considering that the canal has such a huge impact on the Panamanian economy, you would think that they would be racing for a solution. Unfortunately, climate change action would take a global collective, and it seems like a dream at this point. However, the authorities have made some changes to improve passage and stave off the end of the famous Panama Canal. How effective all of these measures would be remains to be seen. The Panama Canal has seen some adjustments and improvements over the years. However, the most significant was the new Panamax project launched in 2016. It was a $6 billion expansion that sought to rejuvenate the Panama Canal and accommodate bigger and bigger ships. The new canal can allow 95% of the world's ships to pass through. This expansion, spearheaded by the Panama Canal Authority and led by figures like Administrator Jorge El Quiano, increased the canal's capacity by adding new locks and allowing the passage of larger vessels, further solidifying its role in global trade. That's not all. Lake Gatun, one of the primary lakes that feed the Panama Canal, was deepened by 45 centimeters to increase the volume of ships that can pass through it daily. However, despite attempts to improve the canal, the water shortage problem persists. To mitigate this problem, restrictions on bigger vessels are placed for 2024 should the rainfall be insufficient. The slow death of the Panama Canal has motivated more intrepid traders to search for more routes to get to their destinations. Among these, the Arctic route is seemingly becoming more popular. Due to climate change, the ice caps that dominated the Arctic are now melting, making travel possible in the summer. As geopolitical and economic dynamics shift, shipping companies may opt for alternative routes based on cost, efficiency, and geopolitical considerations, which could affect the canal's traffic and revenue. Ironically, the same problem that is crippling the Panama Canal is providing opportunities for others. However, with the Red Sea under siege, options remain limited, and the Panama Canal remains our best bet for global trade. However, the residents of Panama cannot simply go elsewhere. The lakes are a primary source of fresh water for the people of Panama. Almost 2 million people, roughly half the population of Panama, rely on the waters of the canal. Considering the gravity of the situation, another source of water is vital. According to Canal Administrator Ricorte Vasquez, a water reservoir can be created to the west of the canal. This would be made of the nearby Indio River and feed Lake Gatun via an underground tunnel nearly 8 kilometers long. That is merely a plan, however, and a lot of work needs to be done before it can even be considered practical. Regardless, it is vital, as the dipping water levels could cost them between $500 million and $700 million in 2024. If the project is lucky and rains favor Panama, it will take 3 months to solve the problem. However, if the drought persists, as seems likely, we can see another 2.5 years of water issues. Because of this, another solution is to extract water from Lake Bayano and pour it into Lake Gatun. Both of these projects are expected to cost astronomical amounts and takes years before any substantial improvement. So the question remains, are we really seeing the end of the Panama Canal before your very eyes? While efforts are underway to rejuvenate the Panama Canal, it's too early to say anything. The situation can now go two ways. If the situation improves and Panama receives more rain, we can see the canal regaining its global prominence. We can also see the residents of Panama living well with their water reservoirs. However, if the situation worsens, the story turns darker. If the Panama Canal dies, most shipping companies will explore alternative routes, like the Arctic Passage we mentioned. Global trade would be disrupted regardless, leading to increased costs of all kinds of goods and frequent shortages. Panama's economy will sharply decline as people lose their jobs and government revenues take a massive hit. This will impact the infrastructure of the country to a huge degree. Lastly, the absence of the Panama Canal could lead to a re-evaluation of the environmental impact of large-scale canal projects. It could change how we react to climate change and operate projects. In a worst-case scenario, that is the best we could hope for. Enjoy your coffee